Okay, hello. I'm going to take you through um, the procedure for writing a good pre-lab assignment. So this will be a fairly brief chat, but I just wanted to record this so that you had a record of it if you need to refer back to what comprises a pre-lab assignment. So anytime you have a formal lab due, on the day that we begin an experiment, you're going to want to have a pre-lab assignment submitted, uploaded to Canvas. And so I have these lab notebook guidelines here, and you'll receive a copy of them in lab. But the first thing to note is that your pre-lab assignment will literally be steps 1 through 5 on this sheet. Okay, so you can see that the parts are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and parts 1 through 5 are the pre-lab assignment. Okay, so what you're going to do first is you're going to have what is essentially a title page, and that is part 1 here. On the title page, very simply, you should have the title of the experiment, the date you're beginning the experiment, and the experiment number. So the title page is essentially just a blank page, and what this helps with is it serves as essentially a page break in your lab notebook. All right. The next part is the purpose. And the thing I want to highlight here is that this should be quite brief and concise. It shouldn't really be more than 2 to 3 sentences. You're not going to give a bunch of procedural detail here. You're literally just going to describe in very broad strokes what you're doing in the experiment. Okay. And I'll give you an idea of what to include in your first pre-lab. Um, once I finish this talk. But the important thing here is that it should literally be only 2 to 3 sentences long, explaining what the goal is of the experiment. The third thing that you're going to have is a table of physical constants, and I have kind of a sample of that shown in this table right here. But the one thing I want to highlight about the physical constants is this should only be for your organic compounds. As an example, if you're working with an ice bath, you obviously need ice and water for that. You don't need to give me the physical constants for water. All right, I'm only interested in the physical constants for the organic compounds you're working with. All right. Um, number four. Number four is MSDS. This is purely for reference. You do not need to print up or submit MSDS sheets with your pre-lab assignment. I have them here only because it is a good idea anytime you're working with something new to refer to these MSDS, or sometimes they're just referred to as SDS, safety data sheets, so that you have an idea of the safety concerns that accompany the things you're working with. All right. But again, that's just for your reference only. Do not submit them or print them. It's just for your information. And then the last part of the pre-lab is simply I call it the experimental plan. This is simply the procedure. Now, this should not be written as a paragraph. It's not English class. You should write this kind of like a cookbook. It should be a stepwise description of what you're going to do in the course of the experiment. All right. And the way I would recommend organizing this, it's largely up to you, but what is usually most common, most convenient is if you have your lab notebook, you have the page. Divide it roughly in 2/3 and then 1/3. And what you can do is you can write out your procedure again stepwise in the larger part of the page, and then that saves room over on the other part where you can record your data. And that way, you're you know you if you read kind of the first step, it might be something like measure out 5 grams of benzoic acid. That way you can go ahead and then record right next to that step the data, right? You would presumably be measuring by difference. You can measure, the weight of the watch glass empty, then the weight of the watch glass with the benzoic acid on it, and then by difference get the actual mass of the benzoic acid. And you can record all of that right next to the step that describes what you're supposed to be doing. So this is where in your data you can record obviously your data, but also you can have your data tables. And you've all had Gen Chem, you know what a good data table is supposed to look like. So that's where you can put those put those data in right next to the procedural steps. And then that would pretty much be it. That would be the pre-lab assignment. All right. Now, as an example, one thing I want to go back to the step number 2, the purpose statement. For experiment 2, this is going to be the first lab that you actually have to write a pre-lab for. Experiment 2 has to do with measurement of physical properties. So in the purpose statement, you would want to focus on that. All right. So you would want in your purpose statement to state that, what physical properties you're measuring. So for this experiment, it is going to be the melting point, the boiling point, and the refractive index. So you'd want to mention that. You'd also want to mention the fact what you're going to be measuring. So for the melting point, you're going to be using a known solid, which is benzoic acid, as your known. And then you will be also measuring an unknown solid. And then for your boiling point and refractive index, you're going to be using a liquid for that. So you're going to be using a known liquid, which is isopropyl alcohol. And then you're going to be using an unknown liquid. Right? So those are the things you would want to include in your purpose statement. And again, it should be very brief, only about 2 to 3 sentences. So with that, I think I'll conclude, and I will see you in class.